Good morning, I'm Doug Millar, and I'm in San Francisco in front of the Hall of Justice at 850 Bryant. And the reason we're here is because this is not the headquarters just for courts, but also for the district attorney, and the election is tomorrow. And so we're going after the district attorney who's never been elected because he was the chief of police of San Francisco, and he's been covering up the torture and murders of children. Plus, he has a report that the feds paid to spend $250,000 on, and he refused to release it because between 2000 and in the next 10 years, there were 900 unsolved murders in this city and over 1,100 unsolved rapes. So he won't release it. He's already had court orders from a judge, then it went to appeals, court order again, and he refused to release it, and so he thinks he can get elected by not releasing the facts that he's been derelict in his job because of the fact he was the one that funded it when he was a chief of police of San Francisco. Now, what's so important, why I'm going after him, is because of the fact that in Anchorage, Alaska, I organize a Support Your Local Police Committee. We want to keep them independent from federal funding. Now with the federal funding, they're becoming federalized combatants. They're actually becoming militarized. And so it's very important to get control of our police departments nationwide, because now, because of what's going on, we need to have civilian review boards in every city and every county in America. Now, for example, why am I going after Gascon? Because when he took over, we had an internal investigation going with the number one, it was the deputy chief of police, Shin, S-H-I-N-N, a Chinese gentleman who was born and raised here, number two in the headquarters, and he had gone outside of the criminal investigation division to find out why the San Francisco Police Department published this report, and you can see it's on San Francisco Police Department letterhead. We've given this, of course, well, first of all, I should tell you what it is. This is a report, a 3-page police report exposing Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino for torturing children. Specifically, one military Army chaplain's daughter, when she was almost 4 years old, she was kidnapped by the head of the San Francisco Army Presidio Daycare, which is an Army base in downtown San Francisco. She was kidnapped by the man in charge of the place, a Southern Baptist preacher by the name of Gary Hambrecht. All right, she was taken to the Aquino's home at this address, 2430 Leavenworth Street in Russian Hills, all right, overlooking the San Francisco Fisherman's Wharf. I've been to his home many times. I interviewed him for 40 minutes one time on March the 5th, 1993, because I'd been exposing him, and so it was one of those things we wanted to size each other up. So I rang his doorbell, and eventually he came out after I talked to his wife. And long story, but the bottom line is they both tortured this precious little child, and she describes in this police report, although she was not even quite 4 years old, that she was bathed in a tub which had lion's feet on it. And it was an old-fashioned tub. And then she was taken to a room that had all black walls with a cross on the ceiling. And so when the police got the search warrant, because she was able to walk down a street and identify, most of us could not walk down a street in San Francisco and identify a place we've been in months earlier, because they all look like the same except for the paint job and the gingerbread frame, the little different things that they have. Bottom line is she was able to do it. Why? Because when they tortured her, they split her personality. So she had a photographic memory of what happened to her that day. So they got a search warrant, raided the place, and they found their child pornography videos, but also their human sacrifices in videos. But because he was CIA officer and CIA Special Ops, and there was psychological warfare, they couldn't arrest him. And then the San Francisco Police Department came in and were notified by the FBI to destroy all records on Aquino. And naturally, the police chief demanded to know why, because this involved national security. It was okay to torture and murder children on camera, have the evidence in your home, as long as you're working with the CIA. Now, when this police department was so upset that somebody in the police department released this 3-page report, we were able to get a copy of it, We got it published in a Marin County publication. And the bottom line is, what's so important about this is because the fact that Oprah had those two, Aquino and his wife Lilith from New York. She was from New York. He was born and raised right here in Marin County in San Rafael. Oprah had him on the show, and when they were on the show, 800 of the victims from 8 states came forward and said, "That's the man that tortured me. That's the man that I was programmed, sodomized by. That's the man I was drugged by, and that's the man most of them were taking to human sacrifices." And yet he still, after 800 victims came forward, he was still protected by the Pentagon. So you can see we got a big problem with the CIA and the Pentagon, and so we have to expose these things because Gascon, the district attorney, stopped our investigation we had going internally at the, as we went to the San Francisco Police Commissioners meeting several times. And so Deputy Chief Shin invited me out in the hallway after I gave my testimony the first time. He happened to be there, and the chief of police was there, Fong. A lady was retiring. Okay, now I want to talk about what Aquino was doing to children. And we have a report here from the Sonoma County, where I live in Santa Rosa, the largest city between San Francisco and Portland, Oregon. And you see it's on San Francisco, I'm sorry, it's on the Sonoma County letterhead, describing the forms of torture that Aquino and many of his Satanists were doing, because he was the #1 high priest in the Church of Satan under Anton LaVey until he left the Church of Satan in 1975 with one of LaVey's 2 daughters, Carla LaVey, and they formed the Temple of Set. Set is Egyptian for Satan. And so this describes all forms of torture. I'm just going to read you a very few clips here. First of all, the address. I blocked out the mother's names. There are 2 mothers here. I blocked them out, and I do the red line from here to her daughter, and I'll tell you a little bit more about this. But the address is 2600 North Coast in Santa Rosa, and it describes the fact that the children have individually described being bound, having their heads placed in the toilet, heads forced into the water in a bathtub, being gagged, being made to eat feces, all right, having needles stuck into them, and being stripped and forced to watch sex acts of adults. Acts of oral copulation and anal penetration with sexual aids were common. Now the mother who gave me this, she gave me both these reports the same day. She said that the first time they tortured her child, and this described here, she was so angry when she talked to the therapist. The first time that daughter met with the therapist, she typed the whole thing in capital letters, so it's a little hard to read. But when she gave me these 2 reports, and of course they were on 4 pages, I cut my cost down by putting them on 1. She said the first time they tortured my daughter, they stuck a pen up her rectum, and then a razor flipped up, and they slashed her rectum. That way, after they sodomized her, it goes back together. There's no stretch marks, and that way there's no evidence of what happened to her within a few days. Okay. Now think about how sick you got to be to do that kind of stuff to a child. And these people were Satanists, and where they were living in 2600 North Coast, the general manager and the maintenance man were the heads of the Satanic Coven. And it describes here that we have 14 people that children have identified, but we only have 2 in custody. Now, Deputy District Attorney Donna Ryan, who I've met with this mother, which I'm not giving their names for obvious reasons, we're trying to let them heal. Even this happened a long time ago. They're scarred for life, both of them. But the bottom line is, it was so sad because of the fact that the first time they said, "This is so much fun doing this to this child. It's okay." Now I'll read what they said here. The last man to take my daughter upstairs was the man she had to call Master. His other name is Pappy. He was a Hell's Angel. Now, Pappy and Ocean, of course, are nicknames, but the mother was so angry, she contacted the Hell's Angels. They brought in a judge from Oakland. He came up and investigated the case, and all the Hell's Angels did was kick them out of the Hell's Angels. They didn't want them involved as a bunch of Satanists, but they never turned them over to the police. You know, the mother was doing that. There was no reason to, they thought. But the bottom line is, and here's My daughter celebrated her 5th birthday when we moved to Santa Rosa. She was graceful, slim, confident, and happy. When I met her, she was 12 years old. She was obese because of what had happened to her. And listen to this one. During what they called Parade the Nigger Day, other children present were told, quote, "Don't feel sorry for her, she's a nigger. This is her purpose on this earth. She is not even human. She is an animal," end quote. Now, I get, even emotionally, now 19 plus years later, I still get so traumatized. I get goosebumps all over my body because I know this family so well. And I'm sorry I get a little choked up sometimes. But here's a report. Remember I said this report was describing the forms of torture they did to this child. But I want to continue on now with the District Attorney's letterhead report. Since the initial arrest, several mothers have been subject to threatening phone calls, apparent acts of vandalism, and possible harassment. I mentioned about the oral copulation, anal penetration. Several of the children were told that their mommies or baby brothers would be killed. And that was if they reported what was happening to them. Some were told that their mother's hearts would be cut out and that they would be forced to eat it. The children are experiencing nightmares and bedwetting. Several of the children have described the involvement of more suspects than the 2 persons we currently have in custody. Well, now, one of the boys got a phone call, and it names the person that got the phone call. And she said, this is the mother, said, I got anonymous phone calls indicating that my husband will be killed. Quote, "We know when he leaves for work," end quote. And in an accident, he would be killed that way. On another occasion, her 3-year-old son, Stevie, picked up a phone and a man said, quote, "I told you not to tell," end quote. She's had her tires slashed when getting ready to go to a court hearing. Lug nuts were removed on another occasion, and she reported moving into the mountains with an arsenal. This is another mother. In the past week, I have had to search for some of the mothers who have gone into hiding. I found some of them living in cramped quarters or unhealthy conditions. Whether the continuing harassment from management, it goes on and on, describing the fact that, as I mentioned, the head of the coven was the general manager of this 230 apartments in downtown Santa Rosa, and the San Francisco Carpenters Union owned the building. Now, that doesn't mean that they were involved. It just means that, you know, we've told everybody, and we can't get any justice for these children. Because of why? The San Francisco crowd, of course, are run by Anton LaVey and Michael Aquino. Now that LaVey is dead, Aquino is the #1 Satanist not only in America, but worldwide, bragging about what he likes to do. And the former the founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, his son is not Anthony, it's not Anton, it's Anthony. I met Anthony in Las Vegas. I was told he was there. He called me, we got together. I asked him, in the interview, I had a friend with me, we were there for 8 hours. I got 3.5 hours on video. I asked him, I said, I'm sorry, on audio tape. I asked him, I said, how many human sacrifices have you seen your father do? He said, about 1,000. How about Aquino? How many did he do? About 600. And yet we can't get these people arrested. Now think about it. Why is that? I know that most police are good people when they join, and still are today. I know that most people in the FBI are good people. Most people that join the CIA are good people. But they, quite often, they want to climb the ladder, they have to break the law. Then once they compromise themselves, then it's easy to control them, and then they get promoted. That's what's going on. And former head of the FBI of Los Angeles, Ted Gunderson, and I have been working together for the last 19 years. He just passed away in July 30th. But here's a report where he talks about children being sexually molested during their preschool years as part of the ritual, satanic ritual. The Satanists also use child sexual molestation to indoctrinate. They have established many child care schools across the country for this purpose. They indoctrinate the children between ages 2 and 4 when they are at a critical age of development. So here's in this report, Ted Gunderson from the head of the Los Angeles FBI names Aquino. So we have all the documentation, but the bottom line is I want to wrap up by saying that we can't get the, remember I mentioned the chief of police of Santa Rosa. Well, when all the Satanists in Sonoma County got together, a Satanist who I met on Halloween night in 1992, around midnight, he was 18 years old, his dad was a cop. He said, the reason I joined the Church of Satan and everything is because I run with the movers and shakers of Sonoma County. Sonoma County, of course, is where the wine country is. That's where Bohemian Grove is. So you can see where the Bohemian Grove crowd, which is San Francisco Bohemian Club, owns the 2,700 acres there. And they have an owl, concrete owl, 39 feet tall, and they do human sacrifice in front of the owl. I have talked to 2 people who have actually seen human sacrifice occur at Bohemian Grove. One I worked with for 19 years, Ted Gunderson referred me to him 19 years ago. And the bottom line is you need to read the book, The Franklin Cover-Up. It's on the internet for free now. The subtitle of The Franklin Cover-Up by a CIA officer now exposing the CIA for all these types of crimes, including Aquino. His name is John DeCamp. And I tell everybody it's the most important book written in your lifetime if you want to protect your family and our Constitution and our country. Why? Because the subtitle is Child Abuse, Satanism, and Murder in Nebraska, but also exposing what happens in Bohemian Grove in that book, what happens in San Francisco, nationwide and worldwide. This is a satanic network, and some of the children have identified Aquino. But some of the people also have identified George Bush Sr. That's the big link. That's it. Remember, he toasted David Rockefeller and said, everything I have, everything I owe to who? David Rockefeller. And so that shows you the link to the Illuminati all the way to the Rothschilds, because the Rockefellers made their money through the Rothschild connections. So I hope you'll go on the internet and check this stuff out. Now here is a 4-page report dated September 1st, 2009. It was almost exactly 2 years ago. Addressed to the Chief of Police, the new Chief of Police of Santa Rosa, and we describe asking him to investigate or reopen the case against Aquino, because they got all kinds of records there on Aquino, because several of these children exposed Aquino, just like the San Francisco Police Department had, but we don't have that report. And I gave a copy to the City Council before I went to Chief of Police. Then I hand delivered this letter to the Chief of Police on September the 9th, 9909. 6 and the 9 are the only 2 numbers you can invert and have a different number. So you have a 999, which is inverted 666. I use the occult numerology to expose them. The Chief of Police refused to return my calls, so I went before the City Council and told them the Chief will not help us expose these crimes. So I went back to the City Council and said, you know, I can't get the Chief of Police to return my calls after I give them all the documentation I gave each of you a copy of, including all the exhibits here and additional set exhibits. They said, well, the Chief's right here in the audience, go see him. So I went over and talked to him, and he said, oh, of course, he's happy to meet with me. Just call my office, I'll meet with you. Well, of course, I did it again and again and again. He refused to. Finally, and I went back to the City Council a 3rd time. Finally, he assigned his captain to contact me. The captain said, well, I'll give you an appointment if I got to do some homework. He refused to return my calls. So then he assigned somebody who called and talked to 2 of us, and one was a witness who saw George Bush do a human sacrifice at Bohemian Grove, Peter Chernoff. And what happened? The man calls us and says the so-called detective wants to know what we're calling about. I said, wait a minute, are you saying you don't even know why you're calling us? He said, no. I said, well then how about doing your homework, read the exhibits I've given you, Chief of Police. Your captain who assigned you to me obviously knows what we're talking about. So get it from those 2 and then call us back after you've done your homework. Why should I explain to you when I've already given all the documentation to all the city council members and the chief? And of course, we never heard from him again. Cover up after cover up after cover up. Why? Because we're exposing the CIA. Now, back to Gascon. He's up for election tomorrow. We've got to make sure he doesn't get elected. Why? Because why would a chief of police of San Francisco coming out of Arizona be an attorney? That's like mixing people that don't even like each other normally. Okay? Well, I'll bet you're going to find out that he is also CIA.